This is a chord. For a moment, I want you to forget everything you know about this chord. Forget what you know about the music that follows this chord. Forget your expectations, your anticipation of what's to come, and forget that it's one of the most famous chords in rock, in order to simply regard it in its solitude. What can we see when we, in our assumed ignorance, confront this moment in isolation? You might be tempted to say, well, not much. It's a single beat. Segmented off from any context, it can tell us no more about itself than a syllable isolated from its sentence. But peeling back the layers reveals a wealth of information. A sharp, staccato delivery tells us to be tense. The distorted tone might convey aggression. The fact that the chord is undergirded by a bass accompaniment and a sharp cymbal conveys a sense of unity, a sort of call to arms. And even if we were to know nothing about what this moment signals, we might get a sense that this single beat implies more information. It is, in some sense, unfinished. It's a summons, a herald commanding us to abandon whatever it is we were doing and await further instruction. An instant later, we are given new information. Ignoring the guitarist's minutiae of chords and frets, we learn that the initial feeling Metallica are attempting to convey is one of dissent, a feeling that will evolve into the dominant theme of the piece. From the abrasive summons of the initial percussive hammer blow, we are pulled down for a series of additional staccato notes, but it's an aggressive, combative descent. Bass and drums interject with accents, as if to physically assault the listener as they are gradually lowered into the track. The occasional lingering note behaves like a siren wail, an ambient foreshadowing of some more expansive event, here limited to mere implication. The mood is restless, disorientating, volatile. We feel as if things have not yet reached a steady state, until a snare roll gradually emerges to dispense with this preparatory material, ushering in a riff that could be designed to provide us with this sense of direction. The mood is still tense, restless, nervous, but the regularity of the rhythm and the repetition of notes feels, in context, like a place of stability. Drums affirm this notion, cutting in with a steady beat alongside an assertive bass rumble. But a sudden break into a link section reveals that the steady state has actually not yet been reached. A high-end accent arrives, its sharp, almost tinny delivery working in contrast to the richly toned low-end chords that surround it. What purpose does this accent serve, so distinct from the preceding material? One obvious way to interpret it is of a milestone, a clear landmark placed here to assist with navigation, or else to guide us from one phase to the next, an usher announcing the arrival of something. What? Well, most obviously, the arrival of substance. It tells us that the somewhat clunky, unfocused introduction was entirely intentional, but that is now over, and we can settle into the experience in preparation for the information we are about to receive. And sure enough, the verse riff that follows is somewhat flattened off, a single, rumbling line disturbed only by the occasional staccato accent. Before we get into the verse proper, it's probably worth talking briefly about technique. Metallica championed a downstroke strumming technique, something they inherited from the Ramones, amongst others. This, with the notable exception of Slayer, is what set American speed metal apart. And to place this in its proper context, it may be helpful to refer to this as speed metal. This, alongside the palm muting, gives the music its physical, demanding posture and creates a direct link back to the music's punk roots. Socially grounded, declarative, immediate, active, combative. Contrast this with German bands like Destruction or South American bands like Sarcophago that used a technique closer to tremolo strumming. This created a blurring of notes from which a form of ambience emerged, something that would ultimately be picked up by the germinal black metal scene certainly, but de-emphasizing the percussive qualities of guitar strumming would be formative to death metal and extreme metal more generally, as younger bands began to explore the inherent atmospheric qualities of the instrument and how these could work alongside a more orchestral approach to riff formation. Back to Metallica, we come to Hetfield's vocals. Although distorted vocals were an emergent practice by 1986, there wasn't the clear-cut segregation between traditional, cleanly sung metal and the various forms of distorted vocals of extreme metal we apply today. Underground bands of this time adopting distorted styles, for instance Bathory, Hellhammer, Sepultura, Possessed, Morbid Angel, Death and so on, they tended to develop this technique to match the intensity of the music, either deciding that clean vocals would be simply inappropriate or they were technically unable to perform them. By contrast, the larger speed metal bands of this time retained stronger links with their older heavy metal influences, and this came through most explicitly in the vocals. Despite Hetfield's modern reputation as the guy who says yeah a lot, his pipes in the 80s were above average, and perhaps at the height of their powers on this very track. This gives Metallica an additional expressive lever to pull on. As fleshed-out vocal melodies ride atop the rhythm guitar, they give emotive colouring to this rumination. Hetfield's lyrics are often kept deliberately open-ended, allowing for multiple interpretations. But here we see explicit references to drug addiction, told in the context of domination, lack of control, a corrosive and tense lament that makes plain what was merely implied by the frantic barrage of music that preceded the opening verse. But clean vocals are a double-edged sword. They are not just a stylistic dividing line in metal, but a compositional one. Any band adopting a traditional singing style will, at various points throughout a track, be forced to demote the music beneath the vocal lines at certain points. For example, despite the obvious quality of the material, I always get the feeling that IOM was holding back on the Dio-era Sabbath albums for this very reason, to give Dio's vocals the room they require to stretch their wings. Even the most expansive, creative, metallic symphony will in some sense regress back to rockist tropes the moment a clean vocal melody arrives. Distorted vocals may be off-putting, samey, limited, but they do, in some sense, focus the mind on compositional purity. That being said, Metallica of this era were masters of creating space for Hetfield to explore his vocal range whilst stuffing their albums with an abundance of music. As the verse builds in intensity, we are led to a pre-chorus. The relentless forward motion of the rhythm guitar falters, and we are presented with hints of melodic content as brief accents decorate the vocals, as if to contrast with the percussive emphasis on the faster master syllables. The music offers a glimmer of light, just as the lyrics veer into the nihilism of obeying your masters, drugs and alcohol. 4 assertive beats and the repetition of master echoing the looser percussive nature of the intro sequence announce the arrival of the chorus. Master, master, master of puppets of These contrast with the open chords that ride under Hetfield's vocals, despite mirroring their general topography. Although clearly contiguous with the verse, the lyrics of the chorus are a more general statement on submission, lack of control, desperation. And they feel, in some sense, literally walled off from the more elaborate and specific verse material by those percussive chord hits. Unlike the other tracks we have analysed in this series, Master of Puppets follows a very traditional verse-chorus structure. We can thus move through the track to the second chorus, only to note a further heightening of desperation in the lyrics: pain monopoly, ritual misery, chop your breakfast on a mirror, which in turn gives way to a bridge. Despite the rather typical structure, the bridge on Master of Puppets is unprecedented, both within the context of the piece itself and within metal composition to this point, and is perhaps one of the most recognisable sequences of metal music ever written, symbolising what the genre as an abstract generalisation actually stands for. Having finally expended its energy, the music seems to come to a complete halt. The main theme of the track is then reasserted, namely, descent, as the master refrain continues on, falling in both pitch and volume, to give way to clean guitars playing through a gentle melody. As the drums cut in to emphasise certain beats, a gentle string line can be heard, undergirding this moment of reflection with a hint of catharsis. A lead melody kicks in which, if played at twice the tempo, could easily form a sequence within a Baroque suite. It's here we witness the personal mechanics that made this iteration of Metallica such a powerful force, regardless of their modern reputation. Hetfield's musical intuition is guided by Cliff Burton's eclectic knowledge. His intimacy with classical techniques, modulation and resolution worked as a kind of midwife for Hetfield's vision. Lars's role as arranger and director, over and above that of drummer, cannot be understated, alongside the spontaneous flair of Kirk Hammett. All work in unison, carving out space for a brief, almost painfully beautiful ballad within an otherwise irredeemably violent, fatalistic piece of music. The unchecked euphoria, a drunken, uncontrollable joy caveated by the arrival of distorted chords that gradually work their way back to a place of atonality. Ambiguity, nihilism. This plays into the themes of the track certainly, but this is also the reason why this sequence has come to define part of the metal psychology. Setting aside any temptation to intellectualize, metal is above all a kind of music for its own sake, elaborate, complex, carefree. Equally, the joy of fans has a kind of purity to it, stretched to the point of naivety. It's a joy that exists in stark contradiction to the realities metal points to: aggressive, violent, fatalistic, and in some sense, heavy. It gives us license to soar above the clouds on the condition that this is only temporary. Eventually, heaviness wins out, and a weight will once again be placed upon us. And as we fall back into the physicalism of a simple power chord run, the master refrain returns as the reality of our situation reasserts itself. At this point, it's probably worth noting the drums. To put it bluntly, Lars is not a naturally talented drummer, but at this point, he was practiced and hungry enough to furnish these tracks with the exact rhythmic framing that they required, never overplaying, but matching the flow of the guitars. His style is, if nothing else, easily identifiable and certainly at ease with itself on this material. This point in the track offers a stark demonstration of this. At first, simply matching the chords with a simple beat, then raising the stakes with a tom roll, using snare hits to emphasize the chords as they lurch around as if seeking something out, and then a final, conclusive tom roll announcing our return to the original tempo. Some open link chords leading us into the next section. The solo is announced by Hetfield screaming, "Fix me." I had, for many years, interpreted this as a cry for help, with Hammett's rather chaotic fretboard murder representing a kind of frantic but ultimately doomed attempt to escape from addiction. But in the Seattle '89 live video, Hetfield gestures as if to inject a needle into his arm as he delivers this line, meaning it may have been intended as a demand for the next fix, making the solo a kind of bacchanalian capitulation to intoxication, a final acceptance that the cycle will never end, so why not embrace the destruction and enjoy it while you can. The solo itself is one of Hammett's less structured from around this era. Despite now being known as the wah pedal guy, his lead work on this, and the albums immediately before and after it, are richly painted and nuanced pieces of music in their own right. The Master of Puppets solo is in some ways unrepresentative, but also delivers exactly what the song required. A blizzard of activity, of throwing itself out in multiple directions at once, aiming to either escape or embrace circumstances. As we cut to a brief low-end riff at half-tempo, this feeling of escape is clarified by a passage that works in contrast to the track's ultimate theme, and we get an ascending passage emerging from the fray. Repeated a few times only to fall back into the opening riff and the final verse, which affirms that yes, addiction has indeed won the day. I will occupy. I will help you die. After the final chorus is dispensed with, the verse riff is recapitulated one final time, with Lars placing the beat emphasis in a slightly different place, as if to bring us to a place of resolution. A gentle guitar harmony emerges above, a final lament to the self that existed before it succumbed to addiction. The closing chords echo the opening in their staccato assertiveness, but end on a kind of slurred, sustained note. Clarity fades, and nothing but maniacal laughter remains. addiction, and the self have become one. For all its euphoria and insistence on the power of individual will, metal, in the final analysis, ends in fatalism.